just waiting for you.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in again to another episode of the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast. My name is Victor Lucia. I'm the founder and president of Brooklyn Fishing Club. I know it's been a minute since you've heard from us, but we've been busy working on trying to bring you the best content possible. Tonight, we're sponsored by the FishBrain app, which I know many of you use, and if you aren't using it, you should be. And our guest tonight is a very special guest, somebody I found through Instagram. His name is Josh Leisen. He runs a blog called lifelessfishing.com/blog. And Josh is pretty much out there trying to catch every single fish that he can on the planet, from small shiners to giant marlin. He travels all over the world and he catches all different types of fish in all different ways. You should definitely check out his blog. It helps me get through a lot of my work days. It helps me get through a lot of downtime because it's just absolutely amazing how many different species that this guy catches, whether it's, small, rare freshwater fish to large tarpon, whatever it may be. This guy has caught a ton of species, way more than me, probably way more than you, and he's got a lot of info to share with us. So we're going to give him a call, and we're going to see what type of tips he can give us in terms of trying to catch whatever type of species you want, wherever you are. So with that said, here's Josh. Hey, Josh, how you doing, man? It's Victor from Brooklyn Fishing Club.
Good. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, man. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast tonight. I'm super excited to have you as a guest. Normally, we have people in the studio, but you're someone I've been following on the gram for a while that I've just been like, man, I have to get this guy on the podcast. I don't care if I have to send smoke signals to him. He's gotta get on here and tell us about his quest for. You're pretty much trying to catch every fish on the planet, right?
I'm trying to catch as many as possible, yeah.
So what is the total number of species that you've caught so far?
So to date, I'm at 555.
555.
To the best of my knowledge, because sometimes you catch fish that are difficult to identify, but that's the closest I can get to is 555 right now.
Got you. So how did this mission start out? Like, when did you decide, I'm going to go from just being somebody who loves to fish to somebody who's going to try to catch them all?
I think it started at a pretty young age. I was fortunate to have my dad take me out fishing when I was a kid, and we'd go fishing all the time. I grew up on the Mississippi River in Red Wing, Minnesota, and the fishing that we did was usually a night crawler on the bottom, and we'd catch a variety of fish, channel catfish, smallmouth bass, walleye, sauger, several different species of suckers, carp. So I enjoyed the variety of and kind of the mystery of having a bait on the bottom and not knowing what you're going to catch. And I also started keeping a tally of what I caught pretty early on. So I had a record of which species I caught and how many of each that I caught. And I never really stopped keeping track of that.
So how do you log the catches? Do you have like a physical notebook like that you write them into, or you have a spreadsheet, like Excel spreadsheet? How do you do it?
Yeah, when I started keeping track, like when I was in high school, I was keeping track of, I'd fill out like basically a data sheet for every time I went fishing. I'd have the weather, the time of day, what I caught, what baits I used. As I grew older, I realized I was spending too much time doing the paperwork side of it, so I kind of simplified it. Now I basically just keep a tally of the species and how many of each. So that's pretty much all I keep. Yeah, I like to keep it right in the rain notebook with me when I'm fishing, so I can keep a tally and not lose track. Or I make notes on my cell phone too.
Nice.
And take lots of pictures so you can go back later and identify things.
Yeah, and that's how I found you, through Instagram. I was just like, man, this kid is crushing it. And it's not even like he's just chasing one species. This kid is, you're catching everything from small shiners of all different types to bonefish and all types of exotic species, And as soon as I clicked the link and checked out your blog, it's super legit and very entertaining as someone who loves to fish. So I guess the first question I would ask you is, what is, out of all the fish you've caught, what is the catch that you're most proud of?
Oh boy, that's a tough question.
You can give me
There's
top
a
three
few
if
that
you
are way
want.
up there. Going to the Amazon River in Peru and catching peacock bass and red-tail catfish. That ranks really high up there. Just this past March, I was in South Africa fishing with a few other lifeless type anglers, Ben Cantrell, Elijah Wang, and Kenneth C. I actually, out of the four of us, I was the one with the fewest amount of species. They have even more on their lifeless than I do. But I caught my biggest fish ever, and one of the coolest fish I've ever caught was a 327-pound estimated ragged-tooth shark in South Africa, surf fishing.
What type of shark? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
They call it a ragged-tooth shark there. It's the same species as our sand tiger sharks that we get on our East Coast.
And how much did it weigh?
In the States. It was estimated 327 pounds.
Nice. So is most of what you do catch and release?
Yeah, almost all of it is. I'll keep a few fish to eat, but if I'm not keeping it to eat it, most of it is catch and release. Sometimes, little minnows and stuff, you'll work up the food chain and use that to catch something bigger, but
That's actually one of the...
More than 99% of my fish go back alive.
Nice. Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is, have you ever used one of the species you've caught to, like, live line or use as bait to catch another species?
Yeah, I have. One example is when I moved to South Carolina for grad school. I was down there for a couple of years, 2010 to 2012, and I'd never caught a blue catfish. But I started fishing in the Broad River there in Columbia, South Carolina, and I caught some whitefin shiner, which on that day was a new species for me. I put that whitefin shiner on the hook, casted it out, and I caught my very first blue catfish on it. So,
wow.
First, I got a picture of the little shiner before I used it as bait. But yeah, that's an example that sticks out in my mind.
Nice. So, how do you microfish for these shiners? Because when I was checking out your blog, I noticed that you've caught, I think over, I could be mistaken, but over 20 different species of shiner.
Yeah, it's probably close to 50.
50, okay.
My shiners by now. Yeah, shiners and darters, sticklebacks. We call them microfish. And the cool thing about microfishing is anybody can do it because it's extremely inexpensive to get the setup. You don't even need a reel. If you had a stick, a couple of feet of light line, and a tiny hook and a split shot, find some bait, and that's really all you need to go microfishing. Really the best hooks that I've used, I order them. There's a website called Tenkara Bum. This is a guy that imports Japanese Tenago hooks. They're super tiny hooks that are snelled, and use that with a split shot and a little piece of nightcrawler, or flip over a rock and find an invertebrate in the stream and put that on as bait, or even slap a mosquito and put that on. Just any little teeny piece of meat and a tiny hook, you catch shiners pretty easily. Darters like to live on the bottom in riffles and streams. They're a little bit more challenging to go for, but they're beautiful native fish here in the U.S. and they're fun to pursue as well. Microfishing is actually very addicting. You can get in a one-on-one battle with one individual darter that's hiding. It'll dart in and out of its hiding place under a rock, and it might grab your bait and spit it out. And I've had times where I've probably spent close to an hour one-on-one with one fish trying to catch it.
Wow.
Sometimes you end up getting it, and sometimes you give up, and the fish won't bite. But.
So, in terms of like the size of the fish, does that matter less than just actually landing a new species?
Yeah, kind of my first priority in fishing is chasing new species of fish. So if it's a species that I haven't caught before, that automatically puts it kind of above anything I've caught before. That said, there's definitely some species that are, I'm more interested in catching than others. There's a ton of silvery shiners that all look pretty similar, and they can be a nightmare to identify. And I mean, you can go to different watersheds and use geography and count scales to identify them. Not my favorite ones to to go after. It's always fun to catch something big and charismatic like a barracuda or some kind of shark or peacock bass or that type of fish. Catfish, I love catfish too. So some of those bigger ones definitely are a little more special to me.
So, out of the shiner category, what would you say the rarest one that you've caught is?
Um, okay, I've actually caught in the Conestoga River in Tennessee. I caught a blue shiner, which is a federally endangered species. And as soon as I realized what it was, I turned it immediately loose. I don't even have a photo of it. But as far as a listed species, I think that's the only one I've ever caught. So that's probably the rarest fish I've caught before.
Wow. Um, Let me dial it back for a second because you mentioned you were in South Africa and you were fishing with other lifeless fishermen. So, is there like a subculture of fishing that is dedicated to lifeless fishing? And if you could define lifeless fishing, like how would you personally define it?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I kind of. So when I was maybe in my high school years, so I'm 33 now, so 15, 20 years ago, I stumbled upon a website called roughfish.com. Started by a group of guys out of Minnesota, and it's become well, there's international users now. They have a big following. But that website promoted some of the non-game fish like suckers and bullheads and moon eye and a lot of fish that a lot of people hadn't heard of before, or that are traditionally considered non-game fish or trash fish, and they celebrated going for these fish. So that kind of got me connected to other fishermen that kind of chased different types of species. And then kind of, I guess, as people start sharing more on the internet and social media takes off with Facebook and Instagram, I've connected with other anglers that do keep specific lifeless and make species hunting kind of their priority. And I've had the opportunity to meet some of these folks and go on trips together, and many of them have become some of my best friends now. So the last couple of trips I've gone on to Peru in 2016 and South Africa in 2018 were with a group of lifeless fishing friends that I basically met on fishing forums and social media that have become some really good friends.
So, out of that community, who has or I mean, it doesn't matter as much as who it is, but who has the most species under their belt, and how many are there that they have?
Okay, so I think there's like 31,000 some species in the world, and Steve Wozniak was the first person to catch 1,000 species of fish in hook and line, and I think that was around 2010. I'd have to double check the year, but he's currently, I think, over 1,800 now, and I think by and large he's leading by several hundred over second place, who I believe is Elijah Wang, who was on our trip to South Africa. And then there's a Canadian guy. He lives in Toronto area, I believe. George Brinkman. He just recently passed 1,000 species, and I fished with him down in Mazatlan and in Florida before.
Wow.
So those are the three guys I know of that are over 1,000 right now, and I've had the fortune of fishing with all three of them. And then my friend Ken, who is in South Africa and Peru trips. I think he's in the 800s, and my friend Ben is in the 600s. So, yeah, there's a few guys out there that are well ahead of me yet, but it is kind of neat that it's. I think it's going to increasingly become a subculture of fishing. I'm seeing a lot of accounts on Instagram, especially where there's folks putting up species lists now. So I think it's really catching on.
And for the most part, it's catch and release.
It kind of depends on every individual angler. I think most of us are catch and release anglers, and it's really about catching a new species and getting a photograph, and then turning it back to the wild, alive and in good health. I think most of the community respects the fish and wants to practice catch and release.
That's good. So, when you're like scouting out a new place, you know, What type of research are you conducting beforehand?
So yeah, that's a big part of lifeless fishing. Is any given area there might be 50 or 100 species within an hour drive, and 80% of them might be catchable, and the other 20% might be really difficult or almost impossible to catch on hook and line. So you do start running out of local species. So the next step is looking at trying new waters to have a good shot at getting some new species. Um, in freshwater areas, there's a lot of in the United States. A lot of the states have like a fishes of Minnesota or a fishes of Florida or fishes of New York book. And some of those are really great resources with dot maps of where different fish have been sampled. So you can kind of plan a trip around different watersheds that have that species or that have high diversity and concentrate efforts there to try to maximize the amount of fish species that you could potentially get on the trip. Another key is using live bait and using small hooks. You usually have a pretty good shot at getting a good variety if you use smaller baits and live baits, and that goes freshwater and saltwater. And saltwater, like tropical saltwater, is one of the best places to rack up species quick. If you go to some new tropical saltwater locations, you can drop a sabiki rig, multiple hook rig with pretty small hooks on it and little pieces of shrimp. Drop that down, and sometimes you can pull up 3 or 4 new species on one drop if you're lucky.
Has that happened to you? How many different species have you caught at once before?
I know I've caught 2 on the same drop on multiple occasions. I'm not sure if I've ever gotten 3, but I've doubled up at least a few times.
And what were those fish?
Um, first time in kind of one of the first times I fished in the Caribbean, I was in Belize fishing from shore off a pier and dropped down and several species of grunts and damselfish at once. I think that happened a couple times down there. Sometimes you get like a parrotfish and a wrasse. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure which ones I caught together, but some of those grunts and damselfishes for sure.
So when you're traveling to fish, is the sabiki rig always packed? Like,
Yeah, definitely. If I'm going anywhere saltwater, I usually pack several sabiki rigs and make sure I have those on hand.
and if you're going fresh,
Uh,
like, is there anything that you specifically pack for fresh?
Freshwater, I like to use, if I'm fishing in a river if I'm not micro fishing, kind of standard size fish, a go-to rig is a single hook, like octopus hook with a night crawler on it or a half a night crawler, and maybe a half ounce to a 1 ounce weight depending on the current in the river. Something like that in rivers works pretty well.
So
Um,
if you had a choice between fishing salt or fresh, is there one that you would pick?
I go back and forth on that. Saltwater is, I would say, for species hunting, saltwater is more productive, um, especially for those medium to large size fish. There's a lot of diversity with the microfish in freshwater, but there's certain. I do like. I grew up on the Mississippi River, and that I do like fishing those big muddy rivers. So whether it's the Mississippi or down in the Amazon, I love fishing in the Amazon River. Of course, that's all freshwater, so I do have a place in my heart for fishing freshwater, and some of those. There's some pretty cool freshwater species out there.
How many times have you fished the Amazon?
Just once. I was there in 2016 for about 6 days on the Peruvian Amazon. Stayed with I give a shout out to Oterongo Expeditions. They hosted us. They have a lodge by Iquitos in Peru, and the owner is very knowledgeable about fishing, and his guides work their butt off to pull our canoes over log jams and get us into these lagoons. And we were up at 4 or 5 in the morning on the water all day. We'd come back for supper, and then they'd take us out for a night fishing session. So, yeah, Adirondack expeditions. If anyone is interested in fishing in Peru, I definitely look them up.
Cool. What's one fish that you're still trying to catch that you haven't yet?
A tarpon.
Tarpon?
That's maybe number one on my list. I've hooked 8 tarpon in my life, and I've yet to land one, so it doesn't count until I actually bring one to hand. So I've hooked them. They've jumped, broken the lines. They've jumped and thrown the hooks, straightened hooks on me and threw them. So yeah, tarpon is pretty high up there. As far as a freshwater species, growing up in the Midwest, to the muskie, the muskellunge is a fish that I have not yet caught, which I think surprises a lot of people because it's in the right places. They're not really all that hard to get, but I just haven't put in enough effort in the right spots, I guess, to get a muskie.
I mean, it's still the fish of 10,000 casts, so,
Yeah, that's what they say.
you know.
I feel like
So
I've casted more than 10,000 times.
So, what's the most species you've caught in one day and where?
I've probably had a few different 10+ days, probably in the low to mid teens for fish in one day. Belize, saltwater fishing in Belize was probably up there. I went to Catalina Island off the coast of kind of Long Beach, Los Angeles area. It's one
Oh
of the
yeah,
Channel Islands
it's
out there.
beautiful. I've
That was
been
my
out
first
there.
time fishing the Pacific, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I racked up quite a few my first day there.
What'd you get there?
Cut opal eyes, kelp bass, California scorpion fish, got a California moray eel, um, opal eye, some California sheep's head, rock wrasse, to name a few. I don't have the list in front of me, but
Wow. And that was all in one day?
most of those were, yeah, pretty much the first day, and then I repeated a lot of them. It was harder, you know. And then a lot of times you show up at a saltwater spot, you show up and, you know, you have a week there, you catch, 60% of your new species in day one, and then it's a kind of a grind to find a few extras before the trip's over.
Yeah. So how do you sustain this lifestyle of travel and fishing? Because I'm sure a lot of
Well, the
people
last
would love to mimic it, and
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and people think that I'm either rich or that I don't work and I just have all this time to travel. But I don't even have a fishing license in Michigan right now. I live in Michigan, and I don't think I've been fishing here in a year now. My fishing is pretty much restricted to that 1 week, that big trip every year or two. Um, Saving up to go on a trip with buddies, and then hitting it hard, getting up super early in the morning and staying up late and grinding for species while I'm on these expeditions. And I catch 40 to 60 fish in a week or two on these trips, and then in between, I'm not even wetting a line. I work at a nonprofit conservation organization. It's a decent job. I get paid decently, but I'm by no means wealthy. But life decisions too. I went to grad school in South Carolina from Minnesota, and part of my rationale for moving across the country was to get access to new species of fish. I used South Carolina, living there for 2 years, as kind of a hub to do road trips in the southern Appalachians and fish the southeast Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, and drive down to the Florida Keys a couple of times. In Belize, I was in Belize for 2 months as a volunteer at a backpackers resort. So, there's a mix of work and play for that. So, kind of a range, kind of look for opportunities that allow me to travel, but and then fish hard once I'm in a new spot with some species diversity.
so what are some of the urban areas that you fish at?
I really haven't fished too many urban areas. I guess Columbia, South Carolina is the biggest city I've ever lived in, and I've fished, down the Congaree River flows through Columbia, South Carolina. So I fished that, bowheads and red breast sunfish, various suckers and catfish, blue catfish there. Um, and I fished saltwater, out of marinas, charter boats and stuff going out of larger coastal cities around the world, or fishing at piers, or off bridges, like in urban areas. So kind of limited experience in urban areas. I prefer to get out and be surrounded by forest and wading around to my knees in forested little creeks and stuff appeals to me more than urban fishing.
Gotcha. You ever fish New York City yet?
I have not. I haven't really been to the northeast part of the country yet.
Oh, you got to get over here, man.
Definitely need to get over there. Yeah.
Definitely. We'll cross some fish off that list.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me run down a few fish that we catch over here and see if you've caught them yet.
Sure.
Striped bass,
Yes, I've got striped bass in South Carolina.
bluefish,
Yep, got bluefish.
porgy, or skunk.
There's a few different kind of porgies. There might be different ones up there.
How about tautog or blackfish?
Nope, I need to catch those. Never been up there for those.
Fluke.
No, I haven't caught any of the fluke on the East Coast. I've caught California halibut and some other flatfishes, but not the fluke.
Gotcha. How about the tuna family? Have you broken into that at all?
Just recently, in South Africa, I caught a yellowfin tuna, and that was my one and only tuna to date.
How'd you catch that?
It was trolling. It was actually a surprise because we were, just a couple hundred yards offshore, and I don't think it was any deeper than 80 feet. So I was really surprised to see a tuna there. But we were fishing. It was me, Ben, Eli, and Ken. We had a charter boat out of Durban, South Africa. Had them take us out to some reefs, and we were just dropping small baits, catching reef fish all day. And just on the way in and out of the harbor, to get back to the marina, we'd troll up the coast to get to the reef, and we were just trolling back, and just got lucky and hooked into a tuna.
How much did that one weigh in at?
20, 25 pounds. I don't know if I got a formal weight on it, but
Was that a keeper? Like you ate that one, or you let that one go?
that one we did eat. Yeah,
Nice.
we gave part of it to the guides, and I took a cut of it and ate it as really, really fresh sushi right there.
Mm. What's your favorite fish to eat?
One of my favorites here in Michigan is the eel pout, or the burbot, which is like a freshwater cod. It's called poor man's lobster.
How do you pronounce it?
We call it burbot,
Okay.
burbot,
Yeah.
or eel pout.
I've heard
Another name for it.
eel pellet. You said.
Eel pout.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've definitely heard of them.
ELPOUT.
I thought it was just called burbot, but
Yeah.
they're good eating, huh? Bottom feeders.
They're pretty good eating. Not everybody likes them, but they have a following of people that taste them to eat them. And they taste pretty good.
What's the biggest one that you've caught of that species?
6 pounds maybe.
Wow, that's pretty good, right? I mean, do they get that much bigger than that?
I think they might get close to 20 at max size. 6 is a decent size. 6 to 10 is a pretty good burbot.
And what do you use for bait for those?
And those are usually caught ice fishing. So like a metal jig tipped with a cut bait of shiner works pretty well, and just kind of jigging that near the bottom. Or live minnows under a tip up.
So, do you do a lot of ice fishing?
I haven't the last couple seasons. I used to do a lot more. I used to get out a lot with my dad growing up. We'd go for pike, probably half a dozen times every winter. Um, up here in Michigan, I like going for lake trout, which I also enjoy eating lake trout. They're
I
pretty
love
good.
lake trout. I think they're
Yeah.
delicious. So, as I mentioned before, the Fishbrain app is sponsoring this podcast, and the Fishbrain app is a great app to use if you're trying to connect with other anglers near you, wherever you are, whether you're traveling, whether you're right in New York City, wherever it may be. It's pretty much the Instagram for fishing. We have two members in the club, Dennis and Gil, who both use the Fishbrain app consistently. Dennis uses it mostly for freshwater. You can find him at Rockland_Reelers, and you can find Gil for the saltwater at Pier Fishing New York. It's pretty much like an interactive map that you can use to find new locations to fish at, either near your current location or if you decide to travel across the world. Um, One amazing feature that they have is species recognition. So they use artificial intelligence to take a picture of a fish that you might not know exactly what type of species it is, but they will tell you what it is as soon as you upload it. You can also keep track of all the fish you've caught over time. So it's like a fishing log, but you don't have to physically write anything down. It just automatically logs you for whatever fish you caught wherever it is. And there are also some premium features, which I would definitely recommend paying for. One of them being bite time. And bite time is super important because it's the world's most advanced fishing forecast. Wherever you are on the planet, FishBrain will use data driven insights and machine learning to provide the best time to catch particular fish species, ensuring you are prepared ahead of your next fishing trip to land your dream catch, whether that's in New York City, Thailand, Australia, Africa, wherever you may be, FishBrain is covering the planet. Um, all you have to do to download it is just go on any app store, wherever you get your apps from, type in FishBrain, download it for free. I would definitely recommend upgrading to the premium aspect of it just so you get that bite time because it's very crucial. We go out, we don't necessarily know when the fish are biting, what the tide is doing, especially if we're traveling. So I would definitely recommend updating to the premium. But definitely check out FishBrain. They've been a great tool for the club and a great tool across the board for catching fish. Is there one place that you haven't fished that you would like love to go to? Like what are some of the places on your list that you've yet to go to that you're dying to get out there and fish?
Hawaii is really high up there.
Hawaii?
There's awesome diversity in Hawaii. Yeah, I've never been there. I'd love to get up to Alaska. I haven't fished there. The diversity isn't quite as high, but there's some really cool species like Arctic grayling and some of the salmon that run up there. It'd be cool to go after Arctic char.
And from what I understand, the Arctic char for the most part are pretty rare, right? I mean, I know they're on a lot of restaurant menus, but aren't they being farmed now? If I'm mistaken, or
I'm not sure on that.
okay,
I don't think I've ever seen Arctic char on a menu. That maybe that's a local thing.
yeah,
Regional.
I don't know. I've just heard that in regard because they look similar to a trout, right? But they have like that giant dorsal fin.
Yeah, they're a lot like a brook trout, I think.
Yeah. Um, but I've heard that they're pretty rare and getting harder and harder to catch as overfishing becomes more of a problem because char is something that you see on the menu in New York City, and it's like you get a small piece of it for like $50. You know,
Oh wow.
yeah. Any other places that you'd like to go to? How about for saltwater?
For saltwater, um, there's there's a lot of places in the Pacific, like northern Australia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Southeast Asia. Any of those places would be great for fishing. You could rack up quite a few species over there.
So when you go to like some of the more remote places that you've been to, like the Amazon or other places, How are you usually accepted by the locals as an American, coming into their country trying to fish? Like, how does that work? Are they happy to see you? Are they kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to show this guy the secret spot? Like what goes on?
For the most part, it's pretty friendly. Yeah, I've never had any negative interactions with any locals while I'm fishing. A lot of the places are, kind of either people mind their own business or they're curious, or a lot of times you get local kids will come up and wanna use the gear, and you handed a kid a rod, or traded a lure for a fish or something to use as cut bait if I didn't have bait. Um, so it's a mix of curiosity and or just people go about their business without paying too much attention of your fish. Or if you hook a big fish, you can draw a crowd and people will come and be interested in seeing it. But I really haven't had a negative experience fishing abroad.
So when you're traveling abroad, I mean, how much gear are you bringing with you?
Less and less each trip.
Why is
I've
that?
learned to pack. I've learned to pack less. I used to want to have one of every at least one of every type of lure available just in case I wanted to use it. And every time I usually come back and I used a sabiki rig with bait the whole time, and I maybe threw a spoon for a while or jigged a spoon. But if I'm going a saltwater trip, I'll pack a few saltwater jigging spoons. Mostly it's the you know equipment for live bait, so it's small hooks, split shots, weights, that type of thing. Maybe a couple of lures, um, a couple of travel rods, like one or two medium action 4-piece travel rods that break down and fit in my suitcase, and then I have an Okuma 3-piece heavy action that can handle a much larger fish. So usually have 2 to 3 rods packed, and again those fit in my standard check bag. Um, and then 3 or 4 reels,
3 or 4
various
reels.
different line weights.
Have you ever had any gear confiscated at the airport?
I've never had an issue with that. No, I've always put all my fishing gear in check bagged. I never try to put it in carry on. But I haven't had an issue with it. No.
So if someone was trying to, travel fish, you would recommend that they pack their fishing gear in the check bag.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably certain gear that you could get away with in carry on, but anything sharp, your hooks, anything with hooks on it, I wouldn't try to bring that in. I'm not an expert, but would I would imagine they'd probably tell you to throw it away when you're going through security. And
I mean, if they're telling you to throw away some shampoo, then they're probably gonna
yeah,
tell you to throw away
probably check.
those
It's
those
better safe in checking it.
those
Not going
na
to be using it on the plane. So.
Yeah, hopefully not.
I know.
Are there any places that you think are, like, overrated or underrated that you fished?
hmm. I'll start with underrated, maybe. I'd say the Southern Appalachians, like Eastern Tennessee, Northern Alabama, Northern Georgia, is an area that it was never really on my radar to fish, but I've had a couple of opportunities to fish that area, and it's really beautiful. As are the Ozarks and Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas. I really like those kind of clear mountain streams, particularly for micro fishing. They're just extremely diverse systems, but also just great places to wade around in and get lost for a few hours, enjoy being in nature.
How about overrated? Any places that you've been like, "Oh, man, this trip is gonna be sick," and then you get there and you're like, not so much."
I don't know, but I can't think of a specific example of a place, but in general, places that are overfished, that get pressured heavily. You often have to work harder. I guess fishing piers, some of the more popular fishing piers, you can spend hours and you might catch a couple of small fish, but it's hard to catch anything big because those coastal fishing piers, like in South Carolina, where 365 days a year, they'd have dozens of anglers dipping lines, and so it makes for tough fishing for tough fishing conditions for sure. That level of pressure.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being an issue. Do you believe in the fish gods? Do you believe in the fish gods that watch over all fishermen and determine whether or not we deserve to catch fish?
Definitely admit that, when you're out there, you feel superstitious from time to time, yeah.
Are there any
You
superstitions that you
try something that works for a while, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, are there any superstitions that you definitely live by on like every trip? Like I know one big superstition up here in the Northeast is like no bananas on the boat. Like, have you seen that superstition carry across multiple countries? Like, what are some of your personal superstitions?
So nothing like that I carry everywhere. I have heard of the no bananas on a boat thing though, so that's interesting. I've eaten bananas on fishing boats and had success, so there's hope for those that eat bananas on the boat. But stuff like lucky lures. I've had some lures that I just have way more confidence in than others, and it's I understand that's probably really subjective, and it probably doesn't matter to the fish, but there's a couple of lures that are my favorites, and I'll tie those on before anything else.
What are some of those? If you don't mind sharing.
One of them is I don't know if you've heard of a rattle trap. It's like a lipless crankbait.
Yep.
Um, there's I have one that's it's not glossy at all. It's like a flat matte white color, like a milky white, and red eyes. And that thing, I've caught fish in freshwater and saltwater on that. And it's also, I've had that lure since I was a kid. And almost every lure I've had, you use it, regularly. You're at some point going to get it snagged and lost, right?
Yeah.
Somehow this lure has survived getting hung up and lost or bitten off. And I've caught northern pike in Minnesota on it. I've caught tons of smallmouth bass in the Midwest on that lure. I brought it to Belize. I was catching horse-eyed jacks at night, just casting to where I heard them splashing. I was pulling those out on that thing, and I brought it to South America and caught a peacock bass on that same, not even the same type, the same literal individual lure. And actually still have it. It's hanging up in my living room.
That's got
So yeah.
It's got to
lucky lure.
feel pretty rewarding, You take it everywhere. It's still holding you down. You might have to get a tattoo of the rattle trap on you, bro.
Yeah. Getting more and more reluctant to use it because I don't want to lose that
You don't want to lose it. Yeah, you might have to retire it and just buy a new one.
Right.
So what's the smallest species you ever caught, and what's the largest that you've ever caught?
So smallest species, smallest individual fish that's a new species for me, I think, was my western mosquito fish. It's under an inch long. Looks like a guppy, kind of. It's one of the live bears.
Where'd you get
Pretty
that
plain
one?
looking. Tennessee, eastern Tennessee.
And then
That's a pretty tiny fish.
yeah.
I don't even think it was hooked in the mouth. I count it because it grabbed the end of the worm and held on as I pulled it out of the water and into my hand.
Wow.
So because it took the bait and it held it in its mouth to hand, I counted it as a catch, even though I don't think it even had the hook inside the mouth. But
count it.
That's good enough to on my kind of my personal rules. I consider that a catch.
As long as you get it out of the water and get a picture, right?
Yeah. My biggest fish ever was the ragged tooth shark 327 pounds was the estimate on that. By far the biggest fish. That's the only fish over 100 pounds I've caught. Other than that, I've caught some really big stingrays surf fishing in South Carolina in the 50 to 100 pound range, southern stingray. I went to Thailand in 2006 I was studying abroad in Australia, and I went to Thailand for spring break. I regret not fishing more. I only fished one day, and I went to a kind of a fishing pond called Bun Samran Lake and caught a bunch of Mekong giant catfish. Caught 11 of those up to 50 pounds. Those are at the time, those were my biggest catches. Some big flathead catfish in the Mississippi River.
Have there any?
Yeah, that's kind of the big end.
Sorry. Have there ever been any like sketchy moments or scary like stories where you've been fishing in a random place on the planet and you've been like, I don't know, maybe I should leave right now. I don't know if I belong here. Like, what are some of the, do you have any stories around like that type of situation?
Probably the closest thing to scary stories or near-death experiences fishing would be several encounters getting caught in lightning, which always scares the crap out of me. There was one time I was fishing a stream in Arkansas, and about knee-deep in the water, the blue sky right overhead, I could hear thunder in the distance, and I could see the clouds coming in. Almost the edge of the clouds was maybe, coming close to straight overhead. The rest of the sky was blue. I hadn't seen any lightning yet, so I was kind of waiting it out and fishing, and all of a sudden, a lightning bolt came right across the river and hit a tree a couple 100 yards away, and it was lightning and thunder immediately, one after another. I threw the rod forward into the river as I did like a barrel roll out of the river onto the sandbar, and then I got up and sprinted under the bridge of the road crossing that I was next to, and that scared me.
You get that rod back?
I went back for it after I ended up sitting in the car waiting out the storm, and then I went back and got the rod.
Crazy.
And I think I kept fishing after that for a while. Cleared up.
Any other unforgettable moments that you've experienced while fishing across the planet?
In a really cool way, one of my favorite experiences was when I was in Peru, sitting on the bank of the Amazon River in the dark, looking at the night sky and the Milky Way, and there's just no light pollution out there, so the stars are so brilliant. And you can see it's in the southern hemisphere, so you can see the Southern Cross. And just sitting there, knowing that I was on the Amazon River, it's a place I dreamed about fishing my whole life. And actually being there, sitting there, holding a rod and feeling the thrum of the current on the line, waiting for a bite, or feeling a tap, tap, tap of the fish under that starry sky in the Peruvian Amazon, that was one of the coolest moments.
Did you get one that night?
I didn't get a big fish. We were hoping for a big catfish. It's actually a relative of the kangaroo, which is that one that's rumored to swim up your urethra and get stuck.
Yeah.
In the water.
You caught one of those?
It's in the same genus as that one. It's a scavenger catfish. They call it the blue whale catfish or Canaro azul. Just a creepy looking fish. The eyes are like half covered over in skin, so it's almost like they almost don't have eyes, and they kind of bite into and twist into things and scavenge. But they're all over down there. They were bait dealers, kind of past the whole trip, taking our bait. But I caught my first one there that night, so I did catch one new fish then.
Have you ever seen any like gators or crocs when you've been freshwater fishing?
Yeah, fishing from boats in South Carolina, I'd see alligators. It wasn't too scary. We were in a boat and we kept distance, so it wasn't too bad.
I was gonna say, if you're in a boat, it's got to be a little more comforting than if you're on land and you see a croc coming towards you. Well,
Yeah, I was
in most
careful not
cases,
to.
you wouldn't see one coming towards you on land, but
Right.
till it's too late,
Yeah,
right?
I was careful not to wade into waters and fresh waters in Florida or South Carolina. You don't want to go wading chest deep into those ponds and stuff where gators are. So you kind of fish a little differently and take more precautions.
So on
Um,
some or most of these trips, do you pack your waders?
yeah, if I'm gonna be in streams, I usually have them with me. Um, always a good idea to keep them clean as you go from fishing spot to fishing spot. Make sure you clean your waders off so you're not spreading invasive species or anything like that around. But um, a lot of times, if it's in the southeast, those streams the water can be cold, but the air temperature is usually close to 100 in some of those areas. So it feels pretty good to walk around in just tennis shoes and wet wade.
Yeah. So the last question I'd like to ask is, what's your next stop? Where are you going next? Or where are
So
you
I haven't
trying to
I
go
haven't
next?
officially I haven't officially bought airfare or signed up for a trip. I've actually really gotten into endurance uh, racing events. So I'm spending a lot of money this year on marathons and triathlons. So it's cutting into my fishing budget a bit. But
Yeah, what are you doing,
um,
man?
yeah, one of the trips I want to do is Taiwan.
Taiwan.
That would be my buddy Eli has been there a few times and with really great success, and there's some cool species there. Um, Hawaii Hawaii is really high on my list. I need to get out to Hawaii. I can
Yeah.
rack up quite a few species there, and it's really not all that far to get to compared to some of those other places. So
Yeah.
Hawaii is definitely near the top of that list.
So just in talking to you, I'm thinking like maybe we should have a second episode where we get not only you but some of the other life list anglers on the podcast, and we can talk about this because I mean I actually wasn't even aware that like the whole life list fishing culture really even existed until I discovered you, and I kind of thought you were one of the only guys that was doing it, but from just talking to you in this past conversation, it seems like this is something that a lot of people are into, and it's more so like, racking up the number of species as opposed to like, just trying to catch the biggest striped bass that you can, like up here where we live. So that could be cool. Um,
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in being on the show again, and I appreciate you having me on today. And I think my friends, Ben, Ken, and Eli would be happy to participate, and there's definitely others out there too.
awesome. Yeah, we could definitely patch them in wherever they're from, but hey, listen, man, thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate it. And I think everybody that's listening will appreciate it too because, this is just such an interesting aspect of fishing to me is just trying to catch as many species. Like when I went on your blog, the Instagram is one thing. I see all these different fish, but when I actually clicked the link on your blog and checked out the descriptions that you have of the places you fished, all the different species you've caught, I was just absolutely blown away by first of all, the shiners. Like, I don't know anybody that goes out and like targets shiners. Like we're up here in Brooklyn, New York City, we're trying to catch the biggest striped bass we can, go out, catch the biggest tuna we can. But like the fact that, people like you that are trying to life list, right? Like are just catching these any type of species, whether it's a microfish or the tarpon that you're dreaming of.
Yep.
It's super, super interesting to me. So I definitely think there will be a part two of this episode for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a diversity of techniques required to chase different fish, from the microfishing um, to catching big fish, and then fishing from salt to freshwater. It's really a way to kind of expand the fishing experience and get to see a lot of new waters and travel, and with the growing community of people interested in lifeless angling, meet new people that are interested in the same thing too.
Yeah. All right, Josh. Well, thank you, man. Thank you for calling in, and we'll definitely be in touch about part two for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if any listeners want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Lifeless Fishing, and my website is lifelessfishing.com. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And yeah, I look forward to a part two. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Great, man. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, talk to you soon,
Have a good
Josh.
night.
You too.
Yep, bye.
Thanks a lot, guys, for listening to the 16th episode of the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast. I believe that's where we're at now. Thank you to everybody that's donated to our GoFundMe campaign to help us keep this going. GoFundMe.com/BFC podcast. And of course, big shout out and thank you to FishBrain, the FishBrain app. Everybody should download it. If you're an angler that travels, even if you're an angler that just stays in one spot, the FishBrain app is almost a necessity at this point because it provides you with so much information that you can't get from Instagram, you can't get from Facebook. A lot of people are very protective of the spots they're fishing. FishBrain app provides a community for everyone to just help you catch fish no matter where you are. So big shout out to FishBrain. Thank you for sponsoring this podcast, and we hope that everybody downloads it at the App Store, wherever you get your apps. FishBrain, thank you. BFC Podcast, we'll be back with another podcast soon. This is Victor Lucia signing off. Tight lines.